Welcome to the Writing Interest Group, Month 4. I am Sarah, and I will be talking about narrative poems. Poetry can be incredibly powerful when telling a tale, and narrative poetry tells a story, often creating the voices of a narrator and the additional voice of characters as well. The entire story is typically written in metered verse. This genre of poems is wide in diversity. They may or may not rhyme, they could be long or short, and the story could be simple or complex. Poems condense words, because the less you say, the more weight your words hold. Thus, narrative poems are dramatic and intense, and they are normally specially arranged sentences with pre-planned breaks in the text to increase flow. Subsets of this genre include epics and ballads. Some examples you may have heard of are The Raven by Edgar Allan Poe and The Iliad by Homer. In the past, when written records were hard to come by and generally reserved for more important documents than stories, it was common for these tales to be passed on through oral tradition, the mother of essentially all modern forms of communication we utilize today. Different cultures and different groups of people passed on their history orally from generation to generation. Historically, much of poetry has its source in an oral tradition because in nature, these works of poetry are narrative, a plotline that is easily reconstructed by memory and spoken to other people. Scots and English ballads, the tales of Robin Hood, and Baltic heroic poems were all originally intended for recitation. In many cultures, there remains a heritage of reciting traditional tales in verse format. Narrative poetry has all the elements of a traditional story, such as plot, conflict, and setting. Try writing a narrative poem. Remember, most of its elements are up to you to decide. Pause this video and put your imagination to work. Here is an example I wrote. Crumpled. Her eyes were chocolate brown, like muddy puddles. As the tears welled into corners and fear cramped her heart, I watched the salt pool at her feet. Sweetness evaporated. She's the bitter type of chocolate with no gravity, sugar stolen. Cracked. It hit her cheek this time, the punch, shattering the glass wall she had tried to build. She knew glass was fragile, but they took away the bricks, and glass was all she had, though the jagged edges cut her. Cursed. The laughter was cruel, fumes from the rocket's launch, of her broken glass, and she was bleeding like rain. As she sank to the ground like a failed mission in her unseen sunlight, the bleeding was internal, and no one could hear her screams. Can't. Whoever said words can't break you, they were wrong, because their words tossed her to the ground every day, like a rocket booster falling back to earth and burning up, silenced by taunt and whisper that had sewn her lips shut. Caged. The bars rattled as she clenched them with whitened knuckles. The key was long since fractured and tossed down the drain. She could only watch the shattered glass like salt crystals on the floor. Bullies, taking the chocolate from her eyes and calling it mud. Can. The sugar they took and the wall they broke was hers, and my chocolate was sour for only watching it be stolen. Her eyes were a sweet chocolate brown when I forged a key with glass pieces and hate's fire for her to wield. Remember how expressive poetry can be, and remember that this story can represent anything. In this case, mine was centered around bullying, but you can write about any matter that means something to you. Writing is self-expression. Remember the importance of making your voice heard.